The scent of baked apples and cinnamon, a warm, golden aroma, filled Elena Voronova's small, impeccably tidy apartment. It was the smell of order, of a life measured not in dramatic events but in the steady, comforting rhythm of well-kept traditions. At 62, Elena, a retired chief accountant, found her greatest pleasure in such precision. The sun, slanting low through the spotless window pane, illuminated a row of African violets on the sill, each leaf a perfect, velvety green, a testament to her patient care. On her desk, bills were not just paid but filed in chronological order, her pension statements cross-referenced with her own meticulously kept ledgers. For a woman who had spent 40 years navigating the treacherous waters of corporate finance, her personal life was a sanctuary of perfect balance. The apple charlotte cooling on a wire rack in the kitchen was for herself. A small indulgence to accompany a new historical novel and a cup of black tea. This quiet solitude was not a sign of loneliness but a hard-won prize, a state of peaceful equilibrium she had built for herself after a lifetime of responsibility. She picked up a small porcelain ballerina from the mantelpiece, a gift from her late husband, and wiped an imaginary speck of dust from its delicate tutu. Everything in its place. Everything accounted for. The sudden, sharp buzz of the intercom shattered the tranquility. Elena's hand froze mid-air. It was 7 o'clock on a Tuesday. Unannounced visitors were a disruption to the ledger of her life, an unexpected debit she hadn't planned for. She walked to the small screen by the door. On it, two faces were framed in the fisheye lens, her daughter, Anna, beaming a smile that seemed a size too large for her face, and beside her, Anna's fiancé, Stanislav, or Stas, as he insisted on being called. His smile was smoother, more polished, a carefully constructed facade. A wave of conflicting emotions washed over Elena. Love, first and foremost, a deep, instinctual current that had run through her life since the moment Anna was born. But it was followed by a flicker of apprehension, a quiet internal alarm that had begun to ring more frequently in Stas's presence. She pressed the button. "Anna? I wasn't expecting you." "Surprise, Mama." Anna's voice chirped through the speaker, artificially bright. "We were in the neighborhood and couldn't resist dropping by to see our favorite mom." "Our only mom," Elena corrected mentally, a familiar pang of accountant-like precision surfacing. She buzzed them in, her mind already shifting gears from quiet contemplation to a state of alert observation. As she opened the door, she was enveloped in a hug from Anna, a cloud of expensive, floral perfume that felt alien in her subtly scented apartment. "You look wonderful, Mama," Anna said, stepping back to survey her. Anna herself was the picture of modern success, dressed in a fashionable trench coat that probably cost more than Elena's entire monthly pension. Her hair was styled in a way that looked effortlessly chic but clearly required hours at a salon. Stas followed, his hand proprietarily on Anna's back. He was tall and handsome in a way that seemed assembled from a men's fashion magazine, a tailored wool coat, a cashmere scarf, and a watch on his wrist that caught the light with an expensive gleam. "Elena Ivanovna," he said, his voice a smooth baritone. He leaned in not for a hug, but for a formal European-style double-cheek kiss that always felt slightly theatrical to Elena. "You have the scent of heaven in your home." "Baking again?" "Just a Charlotte," Elena said, her voice neutral. "Come in, take off your coats. I'll put the kettle on." As they settled in her small living room, the space seemed to shrink around them. They were too loud, too bright, their energy too restless for the quiet order of her world. Stas's eyes roamed the room, his gaze lingering not on the family photos but on the solid, old-fashioned furniture, the crystal vase, the silver-framed portrait of her late husband. Elena felt like she was being audited. He wasn't seeing a home, he was assessing assets. "So, what brings you to my humble corner of the world?" Elena asked, placing a tray with teacups and the freshly sliced Charlotte on the coffee table. Anna and Stas exchanged a look, a quick, practiced glance that spoke of a rehearsed conversation. It was Anna who began, her hand dropping to her stomach in a gesture that was becoming increasingly frequent. "Mama, we have incredible news. Something that will change our lives forever." She paused for dramatic effect. "We found it. Our future." Stas picked up the cue seamlessly. He reached into his sleek leather briefcase and pulled out not a document, but a glossy, heavyweight brochure. He laid it on the table with the reverence of a priest unveiling a sacred text. The cover read, "Elysium Towers. Live above the world." "It's a new development in the city center," Stas explained, his voice taking on the fervent tone of a salesman closing a deal. "Panoramic windows, concierge service, private gym, underground parking. It's not just an apartment, Elena Ivanovna. It's a statement. It's an asset that will only appreciate in value." He flipped open the brochure. The pages were filled with computer-generated images of sun-drenched, minimalist interiors, rooftop infinity pools, and smiling, beautiful people sipping champagne on their balconies. It looked less like a home and more like a permanent luxury hotel. Elena felt a familiar coldness settle in her stomach. It was the same feeling she used to get when a cocky young manager would present her with a budget based on fantasy projections and wishful thinking. She looked at the numbers printed in small font at the bottom of the page. The prices were astronomical, designed for a class of people who measured their wealth in international stock portfolios, not pension funds. "It's beautiful," Elena said, her tone carefully noncommittal. "But surely it's very expensive." "That's the point, Mama." Anna leaned forward, her eyes shining with a feverish light. "You have to invest to succeed. Stas has a brilliant plan." Now it was Stas's turn to lay out the specifics. He spoke in a rapid-fire cascade of financial jargon, leveraging assets, favorable mortgage rates, long-term capital growth. The words were designed to impress, to overwhelm, to create an illusion of sophisticated financial acumen. But to Elena it was just noise. She stripped away the fancy packaging and saw the proposal for what it was, a high-risk, high-leverage venture built on a foundation of debt. They wanted to buy an apartment they couldn't afford, counting on a perpetually rising market and a future income that was far from guaranteed. And then came the heart of the matter. "The bank has pre-approved us for a mortgage," Stas said, slowing down, his voice becoming graver, more intimate. "But to secure the best interest rate and to get the specific apartment we want, the one with the corner view, we need a substantial down payment." He paused, locking his gaze with hers. "We need 5 million rubles." Silence descended upon the room, thick and heavy. The only sound was the quiet ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall counting down the seconds of Elena's life. 5 million. It was almost the entirety of the nest egg she had painstakingly built over decades, the money left from the sale of their larger family home after her husband's death, the funds she had guarded with a fierce, unwavering discipline for her own old age, for a medical emergency, for the simple peace of mind of knowing she would never be a burden to her children. She looked at her daughter. Anna was watching her with an expression of desperate hope, her hands clasped together as if in prayer. And in that moment, Elena saw it all with a devastating clarity. This wasn't a surprise visit. The compliments, the Charlotte, the talk of the baby, it was all a preamble, a carefully constructed stage for this one monumental request. Elena took a slow, deliberate sip of her tea. She set the cup down on its saucer with a soft click. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was quiet but firm, imbued with the unshakable authority of a woman who had signed off on billion-ruble balance sheets. "No," she said. The word hung in the air, small and hard and absolute. Anna's face crumpled. "No? Just no? You didn't even think about it?" "Oh, I did," Elena replied calmly. "I've been thinking about it for the last 10 minutes while Stas was talking. I was running the numbers in my head." She turned her gaze to him, and for the first time, she did not try to be polite. Her eyes were as sharp as a hawk's. "You're counting on a 30-year mortgage at a variable rate in a highly volatile market. Your combined income, even with your projected bonuses, leaves almost no buffer for emergencies. A major car repair, a dental surgery, a period of unemployment for one of you, and you default. You lose the apartment, the down payment, and you destroy your credit for a decade. It's not an investment, Stanislav. It's a gamble. A reckless one." Stas's smooth facade cracked. A flicker of irritation crossed his face before he masked it with a condescending smile. "Elena Ivanovna, with all due respect, the financial world has changed since you were practicing. You have to be aggressive to get ahead. There's a difference between being aggressive and being foolish," Elena countered, her voice unwavering. "I spent my life mitigating risk, not courting it. I will not pour my life savings into a foundation made of sand." She saw the raw disappointment in Anna's eyes morph into a familiar, ugly anger. It was the anger of a spoiled child who had been denied a toy. "So that's it?" Anna's voice rose, trembling with accusation. "You're just going to sit on your money while we're trying to build a future for your grandchild? I thought that money was for the family." "It is," Elena said, her heart aching. "It's for me to live without being a burden. It's for me to handle my own affairs until the very end. That is for the family." She softened her tone, reaching a hand across the table. "Anya, my love, I am not refusing to help you. I simply refuse to help you commit financial suicide." She paused, offering a different path. "Let's be sensible. You need a place to live, a good place. But you can start smaller. And you need to get married properly. I will give you a generous sum for a beautiful wedding. 1 million rubles. No strings attached. You can have the celebration you deserve and put the rest towards a down payment on a home you can actually afford. It was a generous offer, a king's ransom by any normal measure. But Anna stared at her as if she had offered a handful of dust. "$1 million, she scoffed, the word dripping with contempt. "$1 million won't even get us a parking space at Elysium Towers. You don't get it, do you? It's not about just a home. It's about a certain life. The life we deserve." She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the parquet floor. Tears of rage and frustration welled in her eyes. "I knew it," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I knew you wouldn't understand. You're just selfish. You're sitting on a pile of money and you don't want me to be happy. You've never wanted me to have more than you did." The accusation struck Elena like a physical blow, cruel and breathtakingly unfair. She looked at the photos on her wall of Anna's first day of school, her university graduation, family holidays, all milestones Elena had worked tirelessly to provide for. Stas stood up as well, placing a comforting arm around Anna's shoulders. He played the part of the supportive fiancé perfectly, murmuring soothing words to her. But over Anna's trembling shoulder, his eyes met Elena's. The polite mask was gone. In its place was a look of pure cold calculation. It was a look that said, "You are an obstacle. And obstacles can be removed." It was a look that chilled Elena to the bone. "We should go," Stas said softly, his voice once again smooth as silk. "Anna is too upset." They left as quickly as they had arrived. The front door clicked shut, leaving behind a profound silence, the lingering scent of expensive perfume, and the glossy, mocking brochure for Elysium Towers lying open on the coffee table. Elena sank back into her chair, her body feeling heavy, her heart a tangled knot of love, pain, and a new, terrifying emotion, fear. This wasn't just about a daughter's spoiled tantrum. It was about the cold, predatory ambition she had seen in Stanislav's eyes. This was not the end of the matter. It was, she suspected with a dreadful certainty, only the beginning. Elena found herself replaying the disastrous evening over and over in her mind, dissecting every word, every glance. Had she been too harsh? Too unyielding? The accountant in her knew her financial assessment was sound, her logic irrefutable. But the mother in her was tormented by the image of Anna's tear-streaked face, by the poisonous accusation of selfishness that still echoed in the quiet rooms of her apartment. She would catch herself staring at the telephone, her hand hovering over it, a desperate urge to call, to concede, to offer anything just to bridge the chasm that had opened between them. But then she would remember the look in Stas's eyes, cold, appraising, predatory, and her hand would fall away. This was more than a mother-daughter disagreement. She was a fortress under siege, and lowering the drawbridge felt like an act of surrender, not reconciliation. Her sleep was troubled. She dreamt of numbers, endless columns of figures that wouldn't add up, of ledgers where the debits spiraled out of control, swallowing all the assets. In these dreams, Stas would appear, his face a smiling, benevolent mask, while behind his back, he erased entries and forged signatures, leaving her with a book full of black holes where her security used to be. She would wake up with her heart pounding, the scent of Anna's expensive perfume inexplicably lingering in the air. One Thursday afternoon, as she was meticulously pruning a browning leaf from one of her violets, the phone rang. The sharp, shrill sound made her jump. She looked at the caller ID, her heart giving a painful lurch. It was Anna. For a long moment she simply stared at the screen, at her daughter's name glowing there. It was a lifeline and a threat, all at once. Taking a deep breath to steady her hand, she answered. "Hello, Mama." Anna's voice was different. The sharp, angry edge was gone. In its place was a quiet, hesitant tone, laced with a vulnerability Elena hadn't heard in years. It was the voice of the little girl who used to call for her after a bad dream. "Yes, Anya, it's me," Elena said, her own voice softer than she intended. There was a pause, filled with the sound of what Elena thought might be a suppressed sniffle. "Mama, I wanted to apologize," Anna began, her words coming out in a rush. "I was horrible the other night. I said things I didn't mean. It's just, this pregnancy. It's making me so emotional, so crazy. I'm not myself." Elena closed her eyes, a wave of relief so potent it almost made her dizzy washing over her. Of course. The hormones. The stress of impending motherhood. It wasn't that her daughter had become a stranger, it was a temporary madness, a chemical storm she couldn't control. The explanation was so simple, so wonderfully plausible, that Elena clung to it like a drowning woman to a piece of driftwood. "It's all right, sweetheart," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I understand." "No, it's not all right," Anna insisted, her voice gaining a note of mournful sincerity. I was awful. And Stas, he was so disappointed in me. He said that family is the most important thing, and I was behaving like a spoiled child. He said I need to make it right. Elena's internal alarm, which had been blissfully silent for a moment, gave a faint, cautionary ping. Stas, the advocate for family values? It seemed as likely as a wolf advocating for vegetarianism. But she pushed the thought away. Perhaps she had misjudged him. Perhaps his love for Anna was genuine and he was simply ambitious, a trait she herself had once possessed. He's right, Anna continued. And I've been thinking so much about what you said. About starting smaller, about being sensible. You were right, Mama. You're always right about these things. The capitulation was so total, so absolute, that it should have felt like a victory. Instead, a tiny persistent voice in the back of Elena's mind whispered, "It's too easy." "To prove that I'm serious, I want to make it up to you," Anna said, her voice now brighter, infused with a newfound purpose. "I want to take you out for a proper dinner. To celebrate a reconciliation. And the baby." She paused. "Stas and I found the most wonderful place. It's called The Clouds. It's a panoramic restaurant on the 50th floor of a skyscraper. The view is supposed to be breathtaking. Please say yes, Mama. It would mean the world to me. Just the three of us, like a real family. Let's start over." The Clouds. A place known for its exorbitant prices, its celebrity clientele, and a waiting list that stretched for months. It was the very embodiment of the life Anna and Stas craved, a symbol of everything they had just supposedly renounced. The contradiction was glaring, a red flag waving in the face of her cautious optimism. But the thought of seeing her daughter, of sitting across from her and seeing affection instead of anger in her eyes, was an irresistible lure. The hope of restoring the balance sheet of their relationship was more powerful than any financial logic. "Of course, sweetheart," Elena heard herself say. "I'd love that." "Oh, wonderful. How about tomorrow night? 8 o'clock? I'll make the reservation." After she hung up, Elena stood by the window, looking out at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the twilight. She felt a profound sense of hope, but it was fragile, like a thin layer of ice over deep, dark water. The invitation was an olive branch, but why did it feel so heavy, so ornate? Why take her to a place like The Clouds to celebrate sensibility? She walked to her desk and sat down, pulling out a fresh sheet of paper from her ledger book. At the top, she wrote, assets on one side and liabilities on the other. Under liabilities, she wrote, Stas's ambition, Anna's materialism, the unexplained source of Stas's confidence. Under assets, she wrote, Anna's love for me, my love for her, my experience. The liability side seemed to have more weight. It was then that she made a decision. It felt slightly cloak and dagger, a departure from her usually direct way of handling things, but her instincts, honed by years of sniffing out corporate fraud, were screaming at her. She picked up the phone and dialed her son's number. Dmitri, her son, was her opposite in almost every way. Where she was cautious and methodical, he was decisive and action-oriented. Where she saw the world in columns of black and white, he saw it in shades of gray, a murky landscape of human motive and deception. As a major in the economic crimes unit of the police, he navigated this landscape for a living. Dima, hello, she began, trying to sound casual. Mom? Everything okay? His voice was immediately sharp with concern. He knew her well enough to know she didn't call for idle chat in the middle of a workday. Everything is fine. Better than fine, actually. Anna called. We've reconciled. That's sudden, Dmitri said, and Elena could hear the skepticism in his voice. He had never been a fan of Stas, viewing him with a professional's disdain for what he called empty suits with good marketing. She apologized, Elena explained. She wants to take me to dinner tomorrow night to celebrate. At The Clouds. There was a beat of silence on the other end of the line. The Clouds. Dmitri repeated slowly. The place where a bottle of water costs more than your monthly utility bill? That doesn't sound like a sensible reconciliation dinner. I know, Elena admitted, relieved that he saw it too, that she wasn't just being a paranoid old woman. That's why I'm calling. It's probably nothing. I'm sure I'm overthinking it. But I have a strange feeling. I can't shake it. She took a breath. Dima, could you do something for me? I feel ridiculous asking. Anything, Mom. You know that. Could you find out a little about Stanislav? Not an official investigation, of course. Just, I don't know. A quiet look. His business, his background. Is he really as successful as he claims? I just want to put my mind at ease. I want to believe this is real. She could almost hear the gears turning in her son's mind. He didn't question her or tell her she was being silly. He trusted her instincts as she trusted his. "Consider it done," he said, his voice low and serious. "I'll make some quiet inquiries. Nothing that will raise any flags." He paused. "And Mom? About that dinner tomorrow?" "Yes. Enjoy the view. Order the most expensive thing on the menu. But don't sign anything." The line went dead, but Dimitri's words hung in the air. Don't sign anything. The thought that she might be asked to was so absurd it should have been laughable. But it wasn't. That evening, Elena couldn't bring herself to read. She sat in her armchair, the unopened novel in her lap, and watched the city. Her small apartment, which had always felt like a fortress, now felt like a vulnerable outpost. She thought about her son's promise. Dimitri was like a master accountant of crime. He knew how to follow the money, how to find the discrepancies that others missed. While she was preparing for a dinner of reconciliation, he would be conducting a quiet audit of the man who wanted to be part of her family. A strange sense of calm settled over her. She was no longer operating on instinct alone. She was gathering data. She was preparing a balance sheet. Whatever happened tomorrow night at the Clouds, she would not be walking in unarmed. She had her own asset, more valuable than any stock or bond. A son who knew how to look behind the smiling masks people wore and see the true numbers written beneath. The olive branch Anna had extended might be genuine, or it might be a carefully crafted piece of bait. Either way, Elena Ivanovna was ready to find out. The morning of the dinner dawned gray and overcast, the sky a flat, metallic sheet that seemed to press down on the city. For Elena, who had slept only in fitful, shallow bursts, the lack of sun felt appropriate. It was a day for shadows and secrets, not for clarity and light. She rose before her alarm, the ghost of a troubled dream clinging to her, a dream of herself in a vast, empty ballroom, waltzing with a smiling Stas while her pockets were mysteriously slit, her life savings silently draining onto the polished floor. She moved through her apartment with a quiet, deliberate energy that was different from her usual placid routine. This was not the gentle rhythm of retirement. It was the focused, methodical preparation of a general before battle. She bypassed her usual morning ritual of listening to classical music on the radio. Today she needed silence. Silence to think, to plan, to fortify her mind. Cleaning became a meditative act of control. She polished the silver frame of her late husband's photograph until it gleamed, her gaze fixed on his stern, kind face. Andrei had been an engineer, a man of logic and structure, a man who had despised pretension and dishonesty above all else. "What would you do, Andriusha?" she thought, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "You would have seen through this boy in an instant. You would have called him a charlatan and shown him the door." The thought did not comfort her, it sharpened her sense of solitude. She was the sole guardian of their legacy now, the keeper of the fortress. Her professional life, which had felt like a distant chapter from another book, came rushing back to her with surprising force. She remembered the corporate vultures of the late 90s, the so-called restructuring experts, who would arrive with slick presentations and dazzling smiles, promising efficiency and growth, only to carve up the company, sell off its assets, and leave the hollowed-out carcass for the employees to weep over. They had the same polished veneer as Stas, the same easy way with financial jargon that was designed to intimidate and confuse, the same underlying contempt for the quiet, diligent work of building something real. She had fought them then, her ledgers and balance sheets her weapons, her unwavering attention to detail her shield. She had unearthed their hidden debts, exposed their fraudulent projections, and saved the pensions of hundreds of her colleagues. She had not been just an accountant. She had been the chief accountant, the dragon guarding the company's treasure. The realization settled over her like a mantle. She had faced men like Stanislav before. He was just younger and his target was smaller. She went to her wardrobe, pushing past the soft cardigans and comfortable day dresses. At the very back, preserved in a garment bag, was what she called her boardroom dress. It was a sheath of heavy, dark blue silk, impeccably tailored, with a severe, elegant neckline. She had bought it 20 years ago for a critical shareholder meeting where she had to present the findings of a fraud investigation. The dress was not feminine or maternal, it was an instrument of authority. It was her armor. She took it out and hung it on the door, a silent declaration of intent. Today she would not be Mama. She would be Elena Ivanovna Voronova, and she would not be easily trifled with. Miles away in a stark, functional office that smelled of stale coffee and ozone from humming computer servers, Major Dmitry Voronov was conducting his own preparations. His world was the antithesis of his mother's. Her apartment was a museum of a life well lived, His office was a temporary command post, cluttered with files marked confidential, the walls decorated only with a large, detailed map of the city's financial district and a whiteboard covered in a spiderweb of names, dates, and arrows connecting shell corporations to offshore accounts. Dmitry cradled a lukewarm mug of coffee, his eyes fixed on his monitor. He had started his quiet audit of Stanislav Orlov the moment he had hung up with his mother. An official inquiry was out of the question. It would leave a digital footprint that a man like Stas, if he were as cunning as Dmitry suspected, might detect. This had to be done through back channels by leveraging the intricate network of favors and trust he had built over 15 years of navigating the city's criminal underbelly. He began with the basics, the open-source intelligence that any curious person could find. Stanislav Orlov, CEO of Orlov Innovations and Strategic Ventures. The company website was a masterpiece of corporate cliché, filled with stock photos of diverse, smiling professionals and vague mission statements about synergizing future-forward paradigms and disrupting the tech landscape. There were press releases announcing partnerships that, upon closer inspection, were merely non-binding memorandums of understanding. There were glowing profiles of Stas in second-tier business magazines, clearly paid for content masquerading as journalism. His social media was a carefully curated fantasy. Stas leaning against a rented Lamborghini, Stas sipping cocktails on a yacht in Monaco, a photo Dmitry's reverse image search traced to a luxury charter company's promotional gallery. Stas wearing a Patek Philippe watch that, Dmitry wagered, was a high-quality replica. It was the digital footprint of a man selling a story, not a product. The company's official registration showed it was less than 2 years old, with minimal declared assets and a registered address that turned out to be a virtual office service. It was a classic all-sizzle, no-stake operation. This surface-level information was enough to confirm his suspicions, but it wasn't the hard evidence he needed. For that, he had to go deeper. He picked up his personal, encrypted phone and made a call. "Pasha? It's Dima." Pavel Pasha Kuznetsov was a legend, a retired cybercrime analyst from the FSB who now ran a private, and very discreet, security consultancy from his dacha outside of Moscow. He was a digital ghost, a master of the dark web, a man who could navigate the hidden corners of the internet where secrets were bought and sold. "Dima, my boy," Pasha's gravelly voice crackled over the line. "To what do I owe the pleasure? Don't tell me another oligarch has lost his Bitcoin wallet." "Something more personal, Pasha," Dmitry said, lowering his voice. "I need you to take a look at someone for me. Off the books. Deep and quiet. The name is Stanislav Orlov. I'm sending you the details now." Orlov, Pasha mused. "Sounds ambitious. What am I looking for?" "Anything that doesn't fit the public picture," Dmitry said. "Financial stress. Vices. Unofficial business partners. I have a bad feeling about him. He's involved with my family." That was all Pasha needed to hear. "Family," he grunted. "The oldest crime in the book. I'll see what garbage is hiding under his polished shoes. Give me a few hours." Dmitry spent the next 3 hours staring at his case files, unable to focus. He felt a cold fury building in his chest. It was one thing to chase the city's white-collar criminals, the faceless men who defrauded corporations and government funds. It was another thing entirely for one of them to be sitting at a dinner table with his mother, charming her, manipulating her, seeing her not as a person but as a mark. The professional had become intensely personal. He was no longer just a police officer, he was a son protecting his own. Just after noon, an encrypted file arrived in his inbox from Pasha. The file was named The Peacock. Dmitry opened it. It was a digital autopsy of a man living a lie. Pasha, with his unparalleled skills, had bypassed the surface web and plunged into the murky depths. He had found Stas's digital shadow, the one he tried so hard to hide. The report was concise and devastating. First, the gambling. Pasha had uncovered transaction histories from several of Stas's personal bank accounts, showing a steady, escalating flow of funds to a constellation of unregulated, offshore online casinos. These were not casual bets on a football match. These were huge sums wagered on high-stakes virtual poker and roulette. The pattern was classic for a problem gambler. Small wins followed by massive losses, then larger, more desperate bets to try and recoup the money. In the last 3 months alone, the outflow was over 7 million rubles. Stas wasn't just in debt, he was in a financial death spiral. Second, the private lenders. Cross-referencing usernames from gambling forums with chatter on certain dark web marketplaces, Pasha had found credible mentions of Stas owing significant amounts of money not to banks, but to private investors. These were loan sharks, men who operated outside the law and used brutal methods to collect on their debts. One post from an anonymous user mentioned a pretty boy CEO named Stas who was running out of time to pay back a 2 million ruble loan. This explained the urgency. Stas wasn't just trying to fund a lavish lifestyle, he was trying to save his skin. Third, the company. Orlov Innovations was a hollow shell. It had burned through its initial seed funding, likely from other duped investors, with nothing to show for it. There were no products, no clients, no revenue. The company was hemorrhaging money on office rent, salaries for a skeleton staff, and Stas's own extravagant business expenses. It was weeks, perhaps days, away from total collapse. A muscle feathered in Dmitri's jaw. He closed the file with a quiet, final click, the sound like a judge's gavel in the silent room. The fury that rose in him was not the hot, explosive anger of a bar fight, but the cold, patient fury of a hunter who has spotted his prey. The Elysium Towers apartment, the family trust, the reconciliation dinner, it all snapped into focus. It was a desperate, audacious heist. He needed his mother's 5 million not as a down payment, but as a lifeline. A portion to pay off the loan sharks breathing down his neck, and the rest to prop up his failing company and continue his gambling habit, hoping for that one big win that would solve everything. His first instinct was to call in his team, to storm that dinner at the Clouds, and arrest Stas for fraud and conspiracy in front of the entire restaurant. He wanted to see the smug confidence wiped from the man's face as handcuffs were snapped on his wrists. But he stopped himself. That would be his victory, not his mother's. It would turn her into a victim who needed rescuing. And he knew with absolute certainty that was the last thing Elena Ivanovna would ever want to be. She was a fighter. She deserved the right to fight her own battle. He picked up his phone and called her. "Mom," he said, his voice level, betraying none of the rage simmering beneath. "I have the information you requested. And my feeling wasn't just right. It's worse than we thought." Elena listened in complete silence as Dmitri laid out the facts, one devastating detail after another. He told her about the gambling, the loan sharks, the bankrupt company. He spoke calmly, concisely, like a doctor delivering a grave diagnosis, omitting the more sordid details but ensuring the clinical picture was clear. He did not offer opinions or interpretations, he just presented the data. On the other end of the line, Elena stood by her window, looking down at the street below. She felt no shock, no surprise. Instead, she felt a profound, clarifying cold. It was the moment in an audit when all the cooked books and false invoices finally lead to the undeniable truth of the crime. Her hope for reconciliation curdled into a hard, bitter certainty of betrayal. Anna wasn't just being foolish or materialistic. She was an accomplice, either wittingly or unwittingly in a desperate con-man scheme. "Thank you, Dmitri," she said, her voice a reedy whisper. She cleared her throat, and when she spoke again, the steel was back. "Thank you. You have confirmed my audit." "I can be there, Mom," Dmitri said, his voice tight with protectiveness. "I can have a team on standby. We can take him down tonight." "No," Elena said, her voice sharp and absolute. The thought was tempting, but it was the easy way out. It would leave Anna as the grieving, deceived fiancé. It would not force her to see the truth of the man she had chosen, or the truth of what she herself had been willing to do. "No. This is not a police matter yet. This is a family matter. A deeply rotten one. I want him to play his hand. I want to see the cards he lays on the table. I want Anna to see them." She took a breath, her mind racing, formulating a new strategy. "This is what we will do. I will go to the dinner. I will listen to their proposal. I will let them spring their trap." She paused. "And you, my son, you will be my hidden asset. You will arrive at 9 o'clock precisely. Not as Major Voronov, but as Dmitri, my son, who has unexpectedly decided to join us. You will walk in and you will sit down and we will see how their carefully planned presentation holds up under your gaze." It was a risky plan, a direct confrontation. But it was her plan. It gave her back the agency they were trying to strip from her. "I'll be there, Mom," Dmitri said, a note of grim pride in his voice. 9 o'clock. Watch them squirm. As Elena hung up the phone, she looked at the dark blue dress hanging on her wardrobe door. Her armor. She now knew exactly what kind of dragon she was facing. He was not a mighty beast of finance, but a desperate, cornered creature, all smoke and noise and empty threats. And tonight, at the Clouds, high above the city, she was going to slay him. The restaurant was everything the brochure promised and more. It was less a dining room and more a celestial chamber. The ceiling was a dark, vaulted expanse pricked with tiny lights mimicking a starry sky. The outer walls were entirely glass, offering a 360-degree panorama of the city. Tables were spaced far apart, creating islands of intimacy in the vast space. The quiet hum of conversation was underscored by the soft, ambient notes of a live jazz trio. The air smelled of money, a subtle, complex fragrance of expensive perfume, fine leather, and exquisitely prepared food. Anna and Stas were already seated at a prime table right against the window. Anna rose to greet her, her face glowing with a combination of pregnancy and excitement. She wore a flowing emerald green dress that draped elegantly over her burgeoning belly. She looked radiant, and the sight sent a pang of pure, uncomplicated love through Elena's heart. For a moment, all her suspicions seemed like the cynical ramblings of a lonely old woman. "Mama, you came. You look stunning," Anna gushed, embracing her. The hug felt genuine, warm, and full of life. Stas stood as well, a perfect gentleman. He kissed Elena's hand, a gesture so archaic and theatrical it was almost comical, yet he performed it with a straight face. "Elena Ivanovna, we are so honored to have you here. Welcome to our favorite spot in the city." "Our favorite spot?" Elena thought. "You've probably been here once on a corporate expense account." But she smiled graciously. "It's certainly impressive," she said, allowing her eyes to sweep the room. The first half hour was a masterclass in charm. Stas was the perfect host, ordering a bottle of fiendishly expensive French mineral water and guiding Elena through the menu with the expertise of a seasoned gourmand. He and Anna were attentive, solicitous, asking about her health, her garden, her reading. They spoke of the baby with infectious enthusiasm, discussing names and nursery colors. Anna reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "I'm so glad we're doing this, Mama. I've missed you." Elena felt the last of her defenses begin to crumble. She was letting herself believe. She was allowing hope to fill the carefully audited columns of her heart. They were a family here, in this beautiful, impossible place, healing a rift. Dimitri's warning felt a world away, a paranoid whisper from the solid, unglamorous earth below. She let herself be captivated by the view, by the smooth jazz, by the intoxicating performance of a happy, reconciled family. The appetizers arrived, delicate works of art on oversized plates. A single scallop adorned with foam, a translucent slice of tuna with a droplet of sauce. It was food designed to be admired more than eaten. As they nibbled, the conversation remained light and personal. Then the main courses were served, and with them, the atmosphere began to shift. It was a change so subtle that at first Elena couldn't place it. It was like the air pressure dropping before a storm. Stas, who had been directing his charm primarily at the elevator that ascended to the clouds, was an experience in itself. It was a glass capsule, silent and swift, that climbed the exterior of the skyscraper, transforming the sprawling city below into a glittering tapestry of light and shadow. As Moscow unfurled beneath her, Elena felt a sense of vertigo that had little to do with the height. This was Stas and Anna's world, a world of dizzying ascents, spectacular views, and a detachment from the solid ground of everyday life. She smoothed the fabric of her dress, a classic, dark blue silk that was the most expensive item in her wardrobe. It was her armor for the evening, chosen to project an aura of quiet, unshakable dignity. Lena now began exchanging quick, almost imperceptible glances with Anna. Anna's bright smile became a little more fixed, her posture a little more rigid. "Mama," Anna began, setting down her fork. Her voice was a little too loud, a little too formal. "Now that we're all here in this wonderful place, Stas and I wanted to talk to you about something important. Something about the future." Elena's internal alarm, which had been lulled into a state of blissful silence, suddenly blared to life, loud and shrill. "Here it comes." Stas cleared his throat. He looked not at Elena, but towards the entrance of the restaurant. He gave a small, almost invisible nod. "It's about securing our family's future. Not just ours, but yours as well. We've been consulting with some experts, people who can help us make the most of what we all have." As he spoke, 3 men in dark, impeccably tailored suits detached themselves from the elegant lobby and began moving towards their table. They moved with a silent, coordinated purpose that was utterly out of place amidst the relaxed luxury of the restaurant. They were not diners, they were a delegation. Elena's blood ran cold. She watched their approach, her mind working with a speed and clarity she hadn't felt in years. It was the same hyperfocus she'd experienced when discovering a multi-million ruble discrepancy in a quarterly report, the moment when all the small, seemingly unrelated details suddenly snap into a single, terrifying picture. The reconciliation, the expensive dinner, the talk of the future, it was all a beautifully orchestrated prelude. This was the main event. The men arrived at their table. they were a trio straight from Central casting for a corporate takeover. The one in the lead was older, with silver hair and the confident, predatory smile of a seasoned shark. The second was younger, with sharp, hungry eyes and a briefcase clutched in his hand like a weapon. The third was a bulky, silent man who stood slightly behind the other two, his role clearly that of an enforcer or an intimidating presence. "Mama, please don't be alarmed," Anna said, her voice tight. She refused to meet Elena's eyes, staring instead at her own perfectly manicured hands, which were now clenched in her lap. Stas stood up, his face a mask of earnest sincerity. "Elena Ivanovna, I'd like to introduce some very important associates. This is Andrei Viktorovich, one of the top financial consultants in the city." He indicated the silver-haired man. "And this is his legal team, Ivan and Mikhail." Andrei Viktorovich extended a hand, his grip firm and dry. "A pleasure to finally meet you, Elena Ivanovna. Stanislav has told us so much about you. A woman of great prudence and financial wisdom," he said. The flattery was so transparent it was insulting. Elena did not return his smile. She gave a curt nod, her gaze sweeping over the three men, cataloging them, assessing them. They had turned her family dinner into a hostile board meeting. Diners at nearby tables were beginning to cast curious glances in their direction, sensing the shift in the social temperature. "What is the meaning of this, Stanislav?" Elena asked, her voice low and dangerously calm. She did not look at the newcomers. She looked directly at him, the architect of this charade. "It's an opportunity," Mama Anna chimed in, her voice pleading. "A way to make your money work for you, for all of us." Andrei Viktorovich smoothly pulled a chair from a nearby empty table and sat down, uninvited. His legal team followed suit, flanking him. Their small, intimate table for three was now a crowded, adversarial space. The magnificent view of the city was blocked by a wall of dark suits. "Elena Ivanovna," the consultant began, his tone condescendingly patient, as if explaining a complex concept to a child. "We live in a complex financial age. Money that just sits in a bank account is, forgive me, dead money. It's losing value to inflation every single day. The assets you've so wisely accumulated over the years have incredible potential. But they need active, professional management to unlock that potential." He gestured to the lawyer with the briefcase. Ivan opened it with a series of sharp clicks that echoed in the suddenly quiet space around their table. He produced a thick sheaf of documents bound in a handsome leather folder and slid it across the table towards Elena. It landed next to her half-eaten sea base. "This," Andrei Viktorovich said, his voice dropping to a confidential murmur, "is a proposal. A comprehensive financial plan. We've taken the liberty of drafting a structure that would consolidate your assets, your savings, your apartment, your pension fund, into a modern, dynamic trust. A family trust." Elena stared at the folder. She didn't need to open it. She knew exactly what it was. It was a cage, wrapped in the language of legal protection. "The beauty of this structure," he continued, warming to his theme, "is that it provides for everyone. It will generate a steady, significant income stream. More than enough to secure the down payment for Elysium Towers, which as an asset within the trust will further increase its value." He smiled, a flash of white, predatory teeth. "It will provide a generous stipend for you, of course, so you won't have to worry about a thing for the rest of your life. And it will secure the future of your grandchild in perpetuity. It's a win-win-win situation." Elena looked from the consultant's smiling face to Stas's look of earnest expectation and finally to her daughter. Anna was staring at the tablecloth, her knuckles white as she gripped the fabric. She was a willing participant in her own mother's financial execution. "And who would be the trustee?" Elena asked, her voice as cold and clear as the glass separating them from the night sky. "Who would be managing this dynamic fund?" "Well, naturally, as the financial visionary behind this, Stas would act as the primary trustee," Andrei Viktorovich said smoothly. "With myself and my team serving as advisors, of course, to ensure everything is handled with the utmost professionalism." So there it was. The entire audacious, breathtakingly cynical plan lay bare. They wanted her to sign away control of everything she had ever worked for, everything her husband had left her, and hand it over to a man she didn't trust, a man whose eyes held the glint of a gambler, not a steward. They had lured her to this opulent cage in the sky to strip her of her autonomy, using her love for her daughter and her unborn grandchild as the key. She looked at the men, then at Stas. "You have staged this entire evening, this elaborate lie, to pressure me into signing this." It was not a question, it was a statement of fact. Stas's face hardened, the charming veneer finally dissolving to reveal the ruthless ambition beneath. "We staged it to help you, Elena Ivanovna. To help you see the bigger picture. You're being sentimental about money that could be building an empire for our family. My money, Elena corrected him, her voice like ice. My empire. She placed her hands flat on the table. She felt a strange, liberating calm settle over her. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, righteous anger. She was no longer a mother being manipulated. She was an accountant who had found the fraud. And she was about to blow the whistle. I will not be signing anything, she said, her voice carrying across the space. Not tonight. Not ever. She pushed the leather folder back across the table. This dinner is over. The silence that fell over the table was a physical entity, a heavy, suffocating blanket that smothered the ambient jazz and the distant murmur of other diners. Elena Ivanovna's quiet, definitive statement, "This dinner is over," hung in the air, a declaration of war in a place designed for blissful indulgence. The three men in suits, who had sat down with the predatory assurance of apex predators, now seemed momentarily frozen, their well-rehearsed script abruptly torn to shreds. It was Andrei Viktorovich, the silver-haired consultant, who recovered first. A faint, almost imperceptible flush rose on his neck, but his smile remained fixed, a rictus of professional bonhomie. He gave a small, condescending chuckle as if Elena had just told a charmingly naive joke. "My dear Elena Ivanovna," he said, his voice dripping with synthetic patience. "I think you misunderstand. We are not asking you. We are advising you. This is the most logical, the most mathematically sound path forward for your family's financial health. It is a matter of simple arithmetic, not emotion." "My emotions have nothing to do with it, Andrei Viktorovich," Elena replied, her voice as cool and polished as the marble floor beneath them. "My decision is based entirely on arithmetic. The arithmetic of risk, liability, and character. And my calculations show that this proposal is not an investment. It is an act of blatant extortion." The word extortion landed on the table with the force of a thrown gauntlet. The younger lawyer, Ivan, flinched. The silent, bulky man, Mikhail, shifted in his chair, his gaze hardening. Stas, however, seemed to find a new resolve in the open declaration of hostilities. The mask of the earnest fiancé and visionary businessman fell away completely, revealing the desperate, cornered man Dmitri's investigation had exposed. "Extortion." Stas scoffed, a sneer twisting his handsome features. "We are trying to save you from yourself. We are offering you a life of ease, a future for your daughter and grandchild, and you call it extortion? You are a stubborn old woman clinging to a dusty past while the world moves on. That money is rotting in your bank account. It could be building something magnificent." "It has already built something magnificent," Elena retorted, her gaze sweeping over Anna, a look of profound, aching disappointment in her eyes. "It built a life for my children. It provided an education. It was a safety net that allowed them to dream. Its purpose has been served. Now its purpose is to provide me with a peaceful and independent old age. A concept you seem incapable of grasping." It was then that Anna, who had been sitting in a state of petrified silence, finally spoke. Her voice was not the pleading, vulnerable whisper of before. It was sharp, brittle, and laced with the venom of a true believer whose faith has been questioned. "Peaceful? Independent," she spat, turning to face her mother fully. "You call that living? Hiding away in your little apartment, counting your kopecks, talking to your flowers? We are offering you a chance to be part of something grand, to have a legacy. But you can't see past your own selfishness." The raw cruelty of the words coming from her own daughter struck Elena with a force that almost took her breath away. This was not just manipulation anymore. This was a deep, fundamental rift in values, a chasm of understanding so wide she wasn't sure it could ever be bridged. Anna truly believed what she was saying. She believed she was entitled to her mother's life, her mother's security, her mother's future. "The legacy I want," Elena said, her voice trembling slightly for the first time, "is for my children to be decent, honorable people. It seems in that I have failed with at least one of you." The consultant, seeing the conversation veering into messy, unproductive family drama, decided to reclaim control. He held up a hand, a gesture of calm authority. "Let us not descend into recriminations. The situation is quite simple. Elena Ivanovna, you are at a crossroads. You can choose the path of collaboration and prosperity, or you can choose the path of isolation." He let the word hang in the air, freighted with meaning. He leaned forward, his elbows on the table, his voice dropping to a low, conspiratorial tone. "We have, of course, anticipated some reluctance. Sentimental attachments are strong, which is why we have prepared for this contingency." He nodded to the lawyer, Ivan, who once again reached into his briefcase. This time he did not produce a leather-bound proposal. He produced a single, crisp sheet of paper and laid it face down on the table. As you know, Andrei Viktorovich continued, his eyes glinting, Anna is pregnant. In a few short months you will be a grandmother. A wonderful, joyous event. He paused, his smile becoming thin and sharp. Grandparents have a special place in a child's life. But it is a place that is granted, not guaranteed. It is a privilege, not a right. He slowly turned the piece of paper over. It was not a legal document. It was a high-resolution color photograph. A sonogram. A tiny, ghostly image of a developing fetus, a small curled shape floating in a dark sea. The unmistakable form of a child. Her grandchild. Elena stared at the image, her heart constricting in a vice of pain. It was a beautiful, miraculous thing. And they were using it as a weapon. This, the consultant said, tapping a manicured finger on the photograph, is your legacy, Elena Ivanovna. This is the future. A future you can be an intimate part of. Or a future you will only read about in letters and see in photographs sent once a year. If you are lucky. The threat, so elegantly veiled, was now laid bare in all its brutal ugliness. It was the final move in their cynical game of chess. They had checked her with financial logic, with family pressure, and now they were moving for the checkmate, using the most profound emotional connection in her life as their queen. It is your choice, Andrei Viktorovich said, his work done. He leaned back in his chair, the picture of smug satisfaction. Stas delivered the final crushing blow. He looked directly at Elena, his eyes devoid of any warmth or empathy. Sign the papers, Elena Ivanovna, he said, his voice flat and cold. Sign the papers and you could be Grandma Lena who comes over for Sunday dinner and reads bedtime stories. Refuse, and you will be a name. A distant relative the child barely knows. Anna and I will be forced to protect our child from your negativity, from your divisive influence. The choice is simple. Your money, or your grandchild. The room seemed to tilt. The panoramic view of the city blurred into a meaningless smear of light. All Elena could see was the tiny, innocent image on the table being held hostage. All she could hear was the echo of Stas's ultimatum. A wave of despair washed over her, so powerful it threatened to pull her under. For a fleeting second, she almost gave in. What was money compared to this? What was an apartment, a bank account, compared to the warmth of a small hand in hers, the sound of a child's laughter? She could sign. She could give them what they wanted and buy her way back into her family's life. It would be a humiliating defeat, a complete surrender, but it would end the war. But then through the fog of pain and fear, the accountant in her stirred. The dragon in her awoke. What kind of relationship would that be? A transaction? A purchased affection? She would be a tolerated guest in their lives, her presence conditional on her financial utility. They wouldn't be welcoming Grandma Lena, they would be cashing her dividend checks. And what kind of lesson would that teach her grandchild? That love can be bought? That elders can be bullied into submission? That the most sacred bonds can be leveraged for financial gain? No. 1,000 times no. She looked at her watch. It was 5 minutes to 9. Dmitri would be here soon. But she realized in that moment that she didn't need him to fight this battle for her. She had to land the first blow herself. She had to show them, and more importantly, show herself, that she was not a victim to be rescued. She took a slow, deep breath, pulling the cool, conditioned air of the restaurant into her lungs. When she spoke, the tremor was gone from her voice. It was replaced by a calm, absolute clarity that seemed to startle them all with its intensity. You are right, she said, her voice resonating with a newfound power. She looked at each of them in turn, her gaze lingering on Anna. The choice is simple. A flicker of triumph crossed Stas's face. Andrei Viktorovich leaned forward, ready to push the folder towards her again. I choose my grandchild, Elena continued, her voice clear and strong. Anna let out a small, relieved sob. Oh, Mama, I knew you'd understand. Let me finish, Elena commanded, holding up a hand. The authority in her tone silenced Anna instantly. I choose my grandchild. I choose to protect him, or her, from the kind of people who would use a child's love as a bargaining chip. I choose to protect my grandchild's inheritance, not just the financial one, but the moral one, from a gambler, a con man, and a daughter who has so completely lost her way. She stood up. Her movement was not frail or elderly, it was fluid and decisive. She looked down at the men who had tried to corner her, at the daughter who had betrayed her. You have made a grave miscalculation, she said, her voice ringing with the authority of her old office. You audited my finances, but you failed to audit my character. You assessed my assets, but you failed to assess my strength. She picked up her small, elegant purse from the table. This meeting is adjourned. And Stanislav, she added, her eyes locking with his, I would advise you to find a very, very good lawyer. Not for family trusts. For fraud. She turned her back on them, on the expensive meal, on the spectacular view, on the sonogram photograph lying on the table like a discarded piece of evidence. She began to walk towards the exit, her back ramrod straight, each step a deliberate act of defiance. She did not know what would happen next. She did not know if she had just irrevocably severed ties with her only daughter, if she had truly sacrificed her chance to know her grandchild. But she knew with a certainty that settled deep in her bones that she had just saved herself. And in doing so she had held on to the one thing they could not take from her, her integrity. She was Elena Ivanovna Voronova. And she was not for sale. Elena had taken no more than 5 steps, each one a small, personal victory when a new presence altered the tense tableau at the table. It was not a waiter coming to clear the plates or the manager hurrying over to inquire about the disturbance. It was a man who moved with a quiet, confident economy of motion, his path cutting directly through the carefully arranged islands of fine dining. He was tall, dressed in a perfectly tailored dark suit that was somehow more severe, more imposing than the fashionable attire of Stas's legal team. His face was calm, his expression unreadable, but his eyes, sharp, intelligent, and missing nothing, swept the scene with the instantaneous, comprehensive assessment of a professional. He reached the table just as Stas, recovering from the shock of Elena's defiance, was rising from his chair, his face a mask of fury. "You're not going anywhere." Stas hissed, his voice a low, menacing snarl, reaching a hand as if to grab Elena's arm. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." The voice was quiet, almost conversational, yet it cut through the air with the chilling authority of a blade being unsheathed. Stas froze, his hand hovering in midair. All heads at the table snapped towards the newcomer. Dmitry Voronov came to a halt beside his mother, placing a firm, steadying hand on her shoulder. The gesture was both protective and proprietary. He did not look at her. His entire attention was focused on the hostile assembly at the table. "Dima?" Anna gasped, her face draining of what little color it had left. The name hung in the air, a piece of information that immediately recontextualized the situation for the consultant and his lawyers. This wasn't a random interloper. This was family. Dmitri's gaze moved from one face to the next, a slow, deliberate audit. He registered the half-eaten, expensive food, the folder of legal documents, the sonogram picture lying starkly on the white tablecloth. He saw the predatory confidence draining from Andrei Viktorovic's face, being replaced by a flicker of professional caution. He saw the nervous sweat beading on the younger lawyer's brow. And he saw Stanislav, his handsome features twisted into an ugly snarl of thwarted rage. "Good evening," Dmitri said, his voice remaining level, almost pleasant. He pulled up an empty chair from the next table with a smooth, unhurried movement and sat down, creating a new, formidable presence directly opposite Stas and the consultant. "I hope I'm not interrupting. Mom, you forgot to mention you were having a business meeting." The word business was loaded with irony. "Dmitri, what are you doing here?" Anna stammered, looking between her brother and Stas, a frantic, cornered expression on her face. "I was in the neighborhood," Dmitri replied smoothly, his eyes still locked on Stas. "I thought I'd surprise my mother for dessert. It seems the surprises have started early." He gestured vaguely at the 3 suited men. "Forgive me, we haven't been introduced. I'm Dmitry Voronov." Andrei Viktorovich, ever the professional, quickly regained his composure. "Andrei Viktorovich Shevchenko," he said, extending a hand. "A financial consultant. We were just discussing some long-term planning options with your mother." Dmitry ignored the outstretched hand. His eyes narrowed slightly. "Shevchenko," he mused, as if trying to place the name. "Of Shevchenko Capital and Trust? The firm that was implicated in the Northern Star pension fund collapse a few years back? A lot of long-term planning went on there, as I recall. Most of it benefited the planners, not the pensioners." The consultant's hand dropped to his side as if it had been burned. His professional smile vanished, replaced by a stony mask. "I was fully exonerated," he said stiffly. "Of course you were," Dmitry said with a thin, humorless smile. "The best criminals always are." He then turned his full, undivided attention to Stas. The shift was palpable, the air grew colder. "And you must be Stanislav, the fiancé, the visionary." Stas, buoyed by the presence of his legal team and fueled by his own rage, puffed out his chest. "That's right. And you are." "He's my brother, you idiot," Anna hissed under her breath. "I'm the son," Dmitry said, his voice dangerously soft. "The one who looks after his mother's interests." The one who doesn't appreciate seeing her ambushed in a restaurant by loan sharks in expensive suits. The phrase loan sharks caused the two lawyers to exchange a panicked glance. This was spiraling far beyond a simple case of pressuring a wealthy widow. Now see here, the younger lawyer Ivan began, his voice squeaking slightly. Our client, Mr. Shevchenko, is a highly respected. Quiet, Dmitri said. It was not a shout, but the command was absolute. It carried the chilling weight of a man accustomed to being obeyed without question. Ivan snapped his mouth shut. Dmitri leaned forward slightly, his gaze boring into Stas. Let me tell you what I see here, Stanislav. I see a failing business, Orlov Innovations, which is nothing more than a hollow shell designed to impress gullible investors. I see gambling debts to some very unpleasant people who don't file lawsuits when you're late with payments. I see a desperate man trying to pull off one last big con to save his own skin. And I see him using my sister's pregnancy and my mother's love as leverage. He paused, letting the word sink in. How's my assessment so far? Stas stared at him, his mouth slightly agape. The color had drained from his face, leaving behind a pasty, gray pallor. The exposure of his secrets, so swift and so public, had shattered his composure. He looked at Anna, a desperate, silent plea for help, but Anna was staring at her brother, a look of horrified disbelief on her face, as if seeing a monster she had helped invite into their lives. Dmitri reached into the inner pocket of his suit jacket. For a heart-stopping moment, the lawyers might have thought he was reaching for a weapon. Instead, he pulled out his wallet and removed a small, laminated card. He flicked it onto the table. It landed next to the sonogram. It was his police identification. Major, Economic Crimes Unit. Major. Dmitri Voronov, Andrei Viktorovich read aloud, his voice barely a whisper. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. This wasn't just an angry son. This was the law. And they were on the wrong side of it, caught red-handed in an act that hovered dangerously between unethical persuasion and criminal conspiracy. Now, Dmitri said, his voice hardening into a tone of official command. We can do this one of two ways. Way number one, you three, he gestured to the consultant and his lawyers, gather your things, walk out of this restaurant, and forget you ever heard the name Voronov. You will cease all contact with my mother. If I so much as hear that you sent her a letter or made a phone call, I will personally open an investigation into every single transaction your firms have made for the past 10 years. I promise you I will find something. I always do. He let that sink in, then turned to Stas. As for you, the engagement is over. You will return any gifts my sister has given you. You will stay away from her. You will stay away from my mother. You will disappear from our lives. If you do this, I will consider your attempt to defraud my mother a family misunderstanding. A lesson learned. He paused, his eyes turning to ice. Or we can proceed to way number two. I make a phone call. A uniformed detail arrives. We detain all of you for questioning regarding a conspiracy to commit fraud against a vulnerable person. We will subpoena your bank records, your phone records, your client lists. We will talk to your other investors. And I can assure you, Stanislav, the people you owe money to will be very interested to hear that you are in police custody. They have their own ways of encouraging cooperation from one's family members. The threat was clear, precise, and utterly terrifying. He had laid out not just a legal trap, but a personal one, invoking the very loan shark Stas was so desperate to pay off. Andrei Viktorovich and his team didn't need any more convincing. The consultant stood up so quickly he almost knocked over his chair. There has been a profound misunderstanding, he said, his voice strained. He scooped up the folder and the sonogram photo, shoving them unceremoniously into Ivan's briefcase. We were merely offering advisory services. Clearly they are not welcome. We withdraw our proposal. Our apologies for the intrusion. Without another word, the three of them turned and walked away, their retreat a stark contrast to their confident arrival. They almost ran, weaving through the tables, their dark suits melting into the shadows of the opulent restaurant. Now only the family remained at the table, a tableau of wreckage. Elena, who had been watching the entire exchange with a mixture of pride and sorrow, finally sat back down. Her legs suddenly felt weak. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a deep, bone-wearying exhaustion. Stas was deflated, a punctured balloon. The swagger, the ambition, the charm, it had all evaporated, leaving behind a hollow-eyed man consumed by fear. He looked at Anna, his last hope. Anna, baby, you don't believe him. But Anna was staring at the business card on the table. Major, Economic Crimes Unit. She looked at her brother, then back at Stas, her mind frantically connecting the dots. The vague answers Stas always gave about his business, his frequent late nights at the office, the unexplained stress she had mistaken for ambition. The gambling debts, she whispered, her voice trembling. Is it true? Stas didn't answer. He couldn't. His silence was a confession. It's all true, Dmitri said quietly, his voice now losing its hard edge, softening with pity for his sister. He was going to use Mom's money to pay off loan sharks and prop up his sham company, Ani. He was using you. He was using your baby? The final realization hit Anna like a physical blow. She let out a choked, guttural sob, a sound of pure, undiluted agony. It was the sound of a heartbreaking, of a carefully constructed reality shattering into a million pieces. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with violent, uncontrollable sobs. Stas saw his last chance slipping away. He made one final, desperate move. He fell to his knees beside Anna's chair, grabbing her hand. I love you, Anna. I did it all for us. I just needed a little help to get us to the top. We can still do it. Elena watched the pathetic display with a kind of detached sadness. This was the man her daughter had chosen, the man for whom she had been willing to betray her own mother. Dmitri stood up, his patience finally at an end. He walked around the table, took Stas firmly by the upper arm, and lifted him to his feet as if he weighed nothing. The show is over, he said, his voice a low growl. Get out. He propelled the whimpering, defeated man towards the exit. He didn't push him or drag him, but guided him with an irresistible force. He escorted him all the way to the elevator, stood with him until the glass doors closed, and watched the capsule descend, carrying the wreckage of his sister's dreams down into the city lights below. When Dmitri returned to the table, the scene was one of quiet devastation. The food was cold and untouched. The expensive water was half empty. And Anna was still weeping, her cries now softer, full of a desolate, hopeless grief. Elena reached out and placed a hand on her daughter's trembling arm. The gesture was tentative, uncertain. The war was over, but the battlefield was littered with casualties. And she had no idea how to begin clearing the wreckage. The silence that Stas's departure left behind was of a different quality than before. It was not the tense, waiting silence of a confrontation, but the hollow, echoing silence of an explosion's aftermath. The opulent surroundings of the clouds, which had moments before seemed like an adversarial arena, now felt like a gilded cage, trapping them in their shared disaster. Diners at other tables who had been stealing curious glances now averted their eyes with the polite discomfort of people who have accidentally witnessed something far too intimate and raw. The jazz trio, perhaps sensing the shift, segued into a slow melancholic blues number that became the soundtrack to the wreckage. Anna's sobs subsided into shuddering, hiccuping breaths. She did not lift her head from her hands as if the shame of what had transpired was a physical weight too heavy to bear. Elena sat beside her, her hand still resting on her daughter's arm, feeling the tremors that ran through her body. The righteous anger that had sustained Elena through the confrontation had evaporated, leaving behind a profound and weary sorrow. She had won. She had protected her assets, exposed the fraud, and vanquished the villain. But looking at her weeping daughter, it felt like a Pyrrhic victory. In saving her fortress, she had been forced to raise the village where her daughter lived. Dmitri returned to the table, his face etched with a grim mixture of exhaustion and duty. He had shed the persona of the intimidating police major and was once again just a son and a brother, surveying the emotional collateral damage. He signaled to a waiter who had been hovering nervously at a distance. The bill, please, Dmitri said quietly. And boxes for this. My mother hasn't eaten. The waiter, grateful for a concrete task, scurried away. Dmitri sat down. Not in his previous adversarial position, but next to his mother, creating a small, unified front of three. He looked at his sister's bowed head. Ani, he said, his voice gentle but firm. Look at me. Slowly, reluctantly, Anna raised her head. Her face was a ruin. Mascara ran in black rivulets down her cheeks, her eyes were swollen and red, and her skin was blotchy. The radiant, confident woman who had greeted Elena an hour ago was gone, replaced by a shattered, lost girl. She looked at her brother, her expression a maelstrom of shame, anger, and a desperate, childish plea for him to make it all untrue. How long have you known? She whispered, her voice hoarse. About Stas? I've had my suspicions for months, Dmitri admitted. About this specific plan? Mom called me yesterday. She had a feeling. I just confirmed it for her this afternoon. Anna's head whipped around to face her mother. A fresh wave of accusation flared in her red-rimmed eyes. You knew? You knew all day and you let me walk into this? You let me make a fool of myself? You set me up. No, Elena said, her voice tired but steady. I did not set you up, Anna. I let you play the hand you were determined to play. I wanted to believe I was wrong. I hoped, until the very last moment, that you would choose your family over his schemes. I gave you that choice. The setup was entirely yours and his. The truth of her mother's words seemed to pierce through Anna's self-pity. She flinched, her gaze dropping back to the table. The waiter returned with the bill and several elegant takeaway boxes. Dmitri settled the astronomical sum with his personal credit card without looking at the total, a gesture of quiet competence that seemed to highlight the pathetic, performative nature of Stas's earlier largesse. We can't stay here, Dmitri said, standing up. Let's go. The walk out of the restaurant was a walk of shame. Anna kept her head down, trying to make herself invisible. Elena walked beside her, a pillar of quiet dignity, while Dmitri flanked them both, a silent guardian shielding them from the curious eyes of the other patrons. In the silent, swift elevator ride down, no one spoke. The glittering city lights that had seemed so magical on the way up now looked cold and indifferent, a million distant eyes staring at their small, fractured family. Dmitri had driven his own car, a nondescript but powerful sedan that was the vehicular equivalent of his personality, functional, efficient, with no unnecessary frills. He opened the back door for his mother and sister, then got into the driver's seat. Where are we going? Elena asked. Your place, Mom, he said, pulling out into the sparse late-night traffic. We need to talk. All of us. The drive back to Elena's apartment was thick with unspoken words. Anna stared out the window, her reflection a ghostly, tear-streaked mask superimposed over the passing city. Elena watched her, her heart a leaden weight in her chest. She saw not the manipulative woman from the restaurant, but the headstrong teenager who always had to learn things the hard way, the little girl who would scrape her knee and then get angry at the pavement for tripping her. Anna's greatest flaw had always been a stubborn refusal to accept reality when it didn't align with her desires. Stas had not created this flaw, he had merely exploited it to its fullest, catastrophic potential. When they arrived, the familiar, comforting scent of baked apples and cinnamon that greeted them felt like a reproach, a reminder of a simpler, more peaceful time. Elena automatically went to the kitchen to put the kettle on, her body seeking the solace of routine. Dmitri led a still sniffling Anna to the living room sofa and sat her down as if she were a fragile porcelain doll. Elena brought in a tray with 3 cups of chamomile tea. She placed one in front of her daughter. Anna stared at it as if she didn't know what it was. I can't believe he's gone, Anna whispered, more to herself than to them. He loved me. He was going to give me everything. He was going to give you a life built on my money and his lies and need, Dmitri said, his voice stripped of all gentleness now. He was not going to let her retreat into a fantasy of victimhood. You need to see this for what it was. He was a con man. And you were his inside woman, whether you knew the full extent of it or not. That's not true. Anna cried, stung. I loved him. I believed in him. I believed in us. Did you? Dmitri leaned forward, his gaze intense. Did you really believe that a legitimate, successful businessman would need to bully his fiancée's retired mother for her life savings? Did you not question where the money for his fancy car and expensive watches was coming from? Or did you just not want to question it because you were enjoying the ride? The questions hung in the air, sharp and pointed as shards of glass. Anna had no answer. Her silence was a confession of a different kind, not of conspiracy, but of a willful, convenient blindness. Elena sat down in her armchair, a silent observer. This was Dmitri's territory now. He was conducting the interrogation, forcing his sister to confront the uncomfortable truths she had spent months avoiding. Dmitri softened his tone again. He was not trying to break her, but to make her see. Mom, he said, turning to Elena. Can I see your files? Elena nodded, understanding immediately. She went to her small, tidy desk and retrieved a simple manila folder. It was the file she had started after the very first visit from Anna and Stas, the one where she had begun her own quiet audit. She handed it to Dmitri. Dmitri opened the folder on the coffee table in front of Anna. I want you to see something, Ani. This isn't just my opinion. This is data. This is what Mom has been looking at. The folder contained no dramatic police reports or dark web secrets. It was a collection of simple, publicly available information, organized with an accountant's meticulous precision. There was a printout of the Elysium Towers brochure, with the astronomical prices circled in red ink. Next to it was a neatly written calculation by Elena, showing the required monthly mortgage payments and projecting them against Anna and Stas's likely combined income. The results showed a debt-to-income ratio that was unsustainable with a glaring red deficit written at the bottom. There were printouts of Stas's company website, with Elena's notes in the margins, questioning the vague language and lack of concrete achievements. There was a copy of the company's registration, showing its youth and lack of capital. There was even a simple market analysis of the luxury real estate sector, downloaded from a reputable financial news site, predicting a market correction and highlighting the risks of investing at the peak. Finally, at the back of the folder was a single sheet of paper on which Elena had drafted a budget. It was a sensible, compassionate proposal for a young couple starting out. It detailed the costs of renting a comfortable 2-bedroom apartment in a good neighborhood, the expenses of a newborn child, and a savings plan. It showed how they could live well within their means and build a secure future, step by step. It was a roadmap to a real life, not a fantasy. This, Dmitri said, tapping the folder, is not selfishness. This is not a lack of love. This is love. This is a mother trying to protect her child from a mistake. She saw the numbers. The numbers don't lie. She tried to warn you. She offered you a different path, a better one. But you didn't want to hear it. Anna stared at the papers, at her mother's neat, familiar handwriting. She saw the hours of work, the careful thought, the deep, maternal concern that had gone into compiling this information. The silence that Stas's departure left behind was of a different quality than before. It was not the tense, waiting silence of a confrontation, but the hollow, echoing silence of an explosion's aftermath. The opulent surroundings of the clouds, which had moments before seemed like an adversarial arena, now felt like a gilded cage, trapping them in their shared disaster. Diners at other tables who had been stealing curious glances now averted their eyes with the polite discomfort of people who have accidentally witnessed something far too intimate and raw. The jazz trio, perhaps sensing the shift, segued into a slow, melancholic blues number that became the soundtrack to the wreckage. Anna's sobs subsided into shuddering, hiccuping breaths. She did not lift her head from her hands, as if the shame of what had transpired was a physical weight too heavy to bear. Elena sat beside her, her hand still resting on her daughter's arm, feeling the tremors that ran through her body. The righteous anger that had sustained Elena through the confrontation had evaporated, leaving behind a profound and weary sorrow. She had won. She had protected her assets, exposed the fraud, and vanquished the villain. But looking at her weeping daughter, it felt like a Pyrrhic victory. In saving her fortress, she had been forced to raise the village where her daughter lived. Dmitri returned to the table, his face etched with a grim mixture of exhaustion and duty. The weeks that followed the disastrous dinner at the Clouds unfolded not with the dramatic flair of a crisis, but with the quiet, grinding slowness of a painful convalescence. Anna moved back into her childhood bedroom in Elena's apartment, a temporary measure that quickly acquired an unsettling air of permanence. The room itself was a time capsule, with its faded floral wallpaper and shelves still holding the dog-eared novels and academic prizes of her youth. For Anna, returning to it was a daily, humiliating reminder of how far she had fallen. She had left this room full of ambition and dreams of conquering the world. She had returned to it pregnant, jobless, and broken, her grand future revealed as a cheap fiction. Her days fell into a lethargic, shapeless pattern. She slept late, emerging from her room only when the scent of Elena's lunchtime soup became too strong to ignore. She would eat in silence, her eyes fixed on the television screen, where talk shows paraded the trivial dramas of strangers, a welcome distraction from the weight of her own. She rarely spoke unless spoken to, and her answers were clipped, monosyllabic. The vibrant, confident woman who had charmed her way through life was gone, replaced by a listless, sullen ghost haunting the edges of her mother's well-ordered existence. Elena navigated this new reality with the same meticulous patience she applied to her ledgers. She treated Anna not as a prodigal daughter to be chastised, but as a patient recovering from a severe emotional trauma. She cooked nourishing meals, she ensured the apartment was warm and peaceful, and she respected Anna's need for silence, never pushing for conversations her daughter was clearly not ready to have. But it was a draining, difficult task. The quiet harmony of her home had been replaced by a tense, oppressive quiet. It was the silence of unspoken resentments, of shame and disappointment hanging thick and heavy in the air. Sometimes Elena would watch her daughter staring blankly at the screen and feel a surge of sharp, impatient anger. She wanted to shake her, to shout, "What did you expect? Did you truly believe a life of luxury could be built on a foundation of lies and entitlement?" But she would bite back the words, her discipline overpowering her frustration. Anger would solve nothing. Anna had to walk her own path through the wreckage of her choices. All Elena could do was keep a light on in the shelter. Dmitri became the crucial bridge between them. He visited every few days, bringing groceries, a new novel for his mother, or a small thoughtful comfort for Anna, a special type of herbal tea said to be good for expectant mothers, a soft, comfortable pair of slippers. He was the only one who could occasionally draw Anna out of her shell. He would talk to her about neutral, forward-looking topics: prenatal vitamins, birthing classes, the practicalities of preparing for a baby. He never mentioned Stas. He never said, "I told you so." He simply treated her as his sister who was going through a difficult time and needed support. It was during one of these visits that the first invoice for Anna's shattered dream arrived. Anna was sitting at the kitchen table, listlessly flipping through a baby magazine, when her phone buzzed with a series of insistent notifications. She glanced at it, her expression turning from boredom to confusion, then to stark, white-knuckled panic. "What is it?" Dmitri asked, noticing the change immediately. "The credit cards," Anna whispered, her voice trembling. She showed him the phone. Her banking apps were a sea of red alerts. Payment overdue, credit limit exceeded, late fees applied. Elena, who was washing vegetables at the sink, turned around, her hands dripping water. She knew Anna had credit cards, of course, but she had assumed they were for minor, everyday expenses. "Let me see," Dmitri said, taking the phone. He scrolled through the statements, his expression growing grimmer with each swipe. There were charges from boutique clothing stores for thousands of rubles, bills from high-end spas and beauty salons, restaurant tabs that would have fed a family for a week. And then there were the larger items: a down payment on a custom-designed crib from a ridiculously expensive baby furniture store, a deposit for a series of VIP prenatal yoga classes, and multiple, significant cash advances. The total debt was staggering, a sum well into the six figures. "Annie, what is this?" Dmitri asked, his voice low and serious. "This isn't just a few shopping sprees. This is a mountain of debt." Stas said not to worry about it, Anna mumbled, her face buried in her hands. "He said it was just managing cash flow. He said his big deal was about to come through and he would pay it all off in one go. He was using my cards because he said his corporate accounts were temporarily tied up in an investment." Elena felt a cold, familiar dread. Stas hadn't just been planning to steal her savings, he had been actively draining her daughter's future credit at the same time. He had been digging a hole of debt for her, likely using the cash advances to fuel his gambling or pay off the most insistent of his other creditors. "These cards are in your name, Anna," Dmitri stated the hard fact. "The banks don't care about Stas's promises. This debt is yours." The reality of the situation crashed down on Anna with the force of a physical blow. The beautiful clothes hanging in her closet, the luxurious spa days, the dream of a perfect designer nursery, they were not gifts from a successful fiancé. They were shackles she had willingly placed upon herself, all purchased with money she did not have and could not repay. "What am I going to do?" she cried, her voice cracking with despair. "I have no job, no money. They'll ruin me." Elena stepped forward, wiping her hands on her apron. The time for silent patience was over. This was a crisis that required immediate, decisive action. "First," she said, her voice cutting through Anna's panic with the calm authority of a chief accountant taking charge of a financial emergency, "you will stop crying. Tears will not pay the interest." She took the phone from Dmitri and began to examine the statements, her eyes scanning the columns of figures with professional detachment. "Dmitri, we need to call each of these banks. Immediately. We need to explain the situation, that the debt was incurred under fraudulent pretenses, and see if we can negotiate a freeze on the interest and a structured repayment plan. It's a long shot, but we must try." She then turned to Anna, her expression stern but not unkind. "And you," she said, "will get a pen and paper. You are going to help me create a budget. A real one. We will list every single one of these debts. We will create a payment schedule. And then we will go through your closet and gather every single item you purchase with these cards. The clothes, the shoes, the handbags. We will attempt to return what we can. What we cannot, we will sell online. Every ruble will go towards paying down this debt." For the next 3 days, Elena's apartment was transformed into a command center for financial recovery. The living room became a war room, the coffee table covered in bank statements, legal pads, and spreadsheets. Elena was in her element, a whirlwind of focused energy. She spent hours on the phone with credit card companies, her voice a calm, persistent, and unyielding force, navigating Byzantine automated systems and arguing with call center supervisors. She was formidable. She used terms like coercive control and financial abuse, hinting at a police investigation without ever making a direct threat. Dmitri, using his own expertise, drafted formal letters to the fraud departments of each bank, creating a paper trail and adding a layer of official pressure. Anna, under her mother's firm direction, was forced to participate. She had to photograph her designer clothes and post them on resale websites, answering inquiries from strangers haggling over the price of a dress that had once been a symbol of her bright future. Each item she sold was a small, painful act of penance, a tangible stripping away of the fantasy she had so eagerly embraced. During this process, they made another chilling discovery. Tucked away in the pocket of a coat Anna had not worn in months was a formal-looking document. It was a loan application. A personal loan for 1 million rubles from a high-interest lending company, the kind that preys on the desperate. The application was filled out in Anna's name, with her personal details, but the signature at the bottom was a clumsy, unconvincing forgery of her name. It had been denied, likely due to her already maxed-out credit. "He tried to take out a loan in my name," Anna whispered, staring at the forged signature. The evidence was undeniable. This wasn't just recklessness, it was a cold, calculated crime. Stas had not just been using her, he had been actively trying to steal her identity. This small, rejected document was more damning than anything else, proving that his deception went deeper than they could have imagined. The incident galvanized Anna in a way that the mountain of credit card debt had not. The abstract notion of being used was one thing, seeing her name forged on a loan document was another. It was a violation that cut to the core of her identity. The last vestiges of her romantic delusion about Stas crumbled into dust. The anger she had directed at her mother and brother finally turned towards its rightful target. That evening, after a grueling day of phone calls and packaging up designer handbags to be shipped to anonymous buyers, the three of them sat around the kitchen table exhausted. The immediate crisis had been managed. 2 banks had agreed to temporarily freeze interest, and they had a fledgling repayment plan in place, but the road ahead was long and bleak. "I'm so sorry, Mama," Anna said, her voice quiet and heavy with a sincerity that had been absent before. It was the first unsolicited, genuine apology she had offered. "I was so stupid. So blind." Elena reached out and took her daughter's hand. "Yes," she said, not unkindly. "You were. But stupidity is not a permanent condition. It can be cured with a strong dose of reality. You are getting that dose now. This debt." Anna gestured to the pile of papers. "It will take me years to pay this off. How will I manage with the baby?" "We will manage," Elena said, the simple pronoun encompassing all 3 of them. "You will get a job after the baby is born. You will work and I will help with childcare. You will live here and you will contribute what you can. You will live on a strict budget. It will be difficult. Your life will not be the glamorous fantasy you dreamed of. It will be a life of responsibility. A real life." In that moment, a new unspoken contract was forged between them. It was not a contract based on unconditional love or sentimental affection, but on a stark, pragmatic alliance for survival. Elena would provide a home and a safety net. Dmitry would provide legal and practical guidance. And Anna, for the first time in her adult life, would have to provide the hard work and sacrifice required to clean up her own mess. Later that night, long after Anna and Dmitry had gone to bed, Elena sat alone in her living room, the folder of compromised dreams still open on the coffee table. She looked at the sonogram picture which Dmitry had retrieved from the restaurant. In the quiet of the night, it was no longer a weapon or a bargaining chip. It was just a promise. A promise of a new life, a life that would begin its journey burdened by the foolishness of its parents. Elena thought about the cost of dreams. Anna had craved a dream life, and the cost was a mountain of debt and a broken heart. Elena had dreamed of a peaceful, independent retirement, and the cost was shouldering her adult daughter's crisis, her home once again becoming a place of struggle instead of sanctuary. A profound weariness settled over her. She was tired of being the strong one, the responsible one, the accountant for everyone else's mistakes. But as she looked at the image of her grandchild, she knew she would not falter. This was her final, most important balance sheet. And she would see it through, ensuring that, in the end, the assets of love, family, and resilience would far outweigh the liabilities of a young woman's foolish, expensive dream. The final trimester of Anna's pregnancy was a long, slow march through a landscape of quiet tension and forced practicality. The dramatic storms of the confrontation and the debt crisis had passed, leaving behind a gray, monotonous drizzle of daily reality. Elena's apartment, once a sanctuary of peaceful order, now operated with the strained efficiency of a field hospital. Every action was geared towards 2 looming events: the arrival of the baby and the beginning of Anna's long financial penance. Anna's transformation continued, but it was not a joyful blossoming into motherhood. It was a slow, painful shedding of her former self. The sullen, listless ghost of the first few weeks was gradually replaced by a woman weighed down by a heavy, joyless sense of duty. She attended her prenatal appointments alone, taking the bus, her growing belly a conspicuous announcement of a life she felt wholly unprepared for. She dutifully followed her mother's budget, her weekly allowance barely enough for essentials, a stark contrast to the effortless flow of cash she had once commanded. There were no more spa days or boutique shopping sprees. Her primary activity was scouring online forums for second-hand baby equipment, her conversations now revolving around the price of used strollers and the durability of washable diapers. Elena watched this change with a complex mixture of pity and approval. It was a necessary ordeal, a forced education in the value of a ruble and the consequences of one's choices. Yet, it pained her to see the light go out of her daughter's eyes. The vibrant, if misguided, energy that had once defined Anna had been replaced by a weary resignation. She was paying her dues, but the process seemed to be chipping away at her spirit. The physical space between them mirrored their emotional distance. They coexisted peacefully but separately. They shared meals, but their conversations were relentlessly practical, focused on grocery lists, medical appointments, and the repayment schedule pinned to the refrigerator door. They never spoke of Stas. His name was a black hole in their family history, a void they carefully navigated around. They never spoke of the future beyond the immediate logistics of the baby's arrival. The larger questions of forgiveness, of trust, of what their relationship would ultimately become, were left unasked, hanging in the air like dust motes visible only in a stray sunbeam. Dmitri remained their anchor. He was the one who could bring a flicker of a genuine smile to Anna's face, teasing her about her cravings or sharing a funny story from work. He took on the role that a husband or partner should have played, assembling the second-hand crib with a quiet competence, installing the car seat in his own car for future hospital trips, and patiently explaining the intricacies of parental leave paperwork. He was their buffer, their mediator, their rock. But Elena saw the toll it took on him, the weary line around his eyes that deepened with each visit. He was carrying the emotional weight for all of them. One crisp autumn evening, about a month before Anna's due date, Dmitri arrived with a large flat box. "What's this?" Anna asked, her voice flat. "A peace offering," he said, placing it on the floor. He opened it to reveal a beautiful hand-knitted baby blanket, in a soft, gender-neutral shade of pale yellow. It was intricate and clearly made with great skill. "It's from Aunt Olga," Dmitri explained, referring to their mother's sister. "She heard about the situation. She wanted you to have it." Anna stared at the blanket, her fingers tracing the delicate pattern. A single tear welled and dropped onto the soft wool. It was the first gift for her baby that wasn't a practical necessity, the first item that wasn't second-hand. It was a simple, unconditional gesture of love from a family she felt she had alienated. It was a reminder that beyond the cramped confines of this apartment and her personal disgrace, a larger world of family still existed. "It's beautiful," she whispered, clutching it to her chest. It was a small crack in the armor of her apathy, a brief moment of genuine, unadulterated emotion. The baby came 2 weeks early, arriving with the same sudden disruptive force that had characterized the entire saga. It began in the dead of night, with Anna's sharp cry of pain from her bedroom. The carefully planned, orderly process they had mapped out dissolved into a scramble of panicked urgency. Elena, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and adrenaline, went into chief accountant mode, grabbing the pre-packed hospital bag, timing contractions with her watch, her voice a calm, steady presence in the chaos. Dmitri, summoned by a frantic phone call, arrived within 20 minutes, his face a mask of professional calm as he guided his pale, frightened sister to the car. The hospital was a blur of bright lights, antiseptic smells, and the controlled chaos of the maternity ward. Elena and Dmitri were relegated to a waiting room, two silent figures under the harsh fluorescent lights. For Elena, the waiting was a unique form of torment. She was powerless, a bystander to one of life's most fundamental and dangerous events. All her skills, her logic, her financial acumen were useless here. All she could do was sit and wait and pray. She and Dmitri barely spoke. The hours stretched on, marked only by the changing shifts of the nurses and the occasional, distant cry of a newborn. They were suspended in a liminal space, the past a painful memory, the future an unknown entity being forged in a sterile room down the hall. Finally, in the pale gray light of dawn, a nurse appeared in the doorway, her face wreathed in a tired smile. "You can come in now. You have a grandson." They followed her into the small recovery room. Anna was propped up against a pile of pillows, her face pale and utterly exhausted, but with a new strange light in her eyes. In the crook of her arm, wrapped in a standard-issue hospital blanket, was a tiny red-faced, scrunched-up creature. Elena stopped in the doorway, her breath catching in her throat. All the anger, all the resentment, all the bitter disappointment of the past months seemed to evaporate in that single, overwhelming moment. This was not a bargaining chip. This was not a consequence or a burden. This was her grandson. A new life. A clean ledger. She approached the bed slowly, as if walking on sacred ground. Dmitri hung back, giving them space. "He's beautiful, Anya," Elena said, her voice thick with unshed tears. Anna looked up at her mother, and for the first time in nearly a year, her smile was genuine, free of artifice or shame. It was a smile of pure primal pride and overwhelming love. "He is, isn't he?" she whispered. She looked down at the tiny baby in her arms. "I want to name him Andrei. After Dad." The name struck Elena with the force of a physical blow. Andrei. Her husband. The man whose memory she had felt she was defending throughout this entire ordeal. It was the most profound, most meaningful olive branch Anna could possibly have offered. It was an apology, a reconciliation, and a promise, all contained in a single name. "Your father would have been so proud," Elena managed to say, reaching out a trembling hand to touch the baby's soft cheek. In that moment, the ledger of their past grievances was not erased, but it was balanced. The colossal debt of betrayal and disappointment was offset by the immeasurable asset of this new life, this new beginning. The first few weeks at home with baby Andrei were a chaotic, sleep-deprived, and strangely joyful time. The tense silence of the apartment was replaced by a new soundtrack. The baby's unpredictable cries, the soft gurgles and coos, the constant hum of the washing machine. The oppressive atmosphere of shame and resentment was dispelled by the all-consuming, immediate needs of a helpless infant. Anna, to Elena's surprise, blossomed. The listless, apathetic woman was gone. In her place was a mother fiercely protective, endlessly patient, and utterly besotted with her son. The love she had been so desperate to find in a man like Stas, she now found in its purest, most unconditional form in the tiny dependent creature in her arms. She learned to function on 2 hours of sleep, to decipher the meaning of different cries, to change a diaper with an efficiency that would have impressed her mother. For the first time, Elena saw in her daughter a strength and resilience she never knew she possessed. Elena, for her part, slipped into the role of grandmother with a natural ease that surprised even herself. She was the calm in the storm, the one who could soothe Andrei when Anna was at her wit's end, the one who knew the old folk remedies for colic, the one who would take the baby for a walk in the crisp winter air just so Anna could have an hour to herself to shower or sleep. A new unspoken partnership formed between them, forged in the trenches of early parenthood. They were a team. One afternoon, about a month after Andrei's birth, Elena was sitting in her armchair, gently rocking the sleeping baby, while Anna was on the phone in the kitchen, speaking in low, serious tones. Elena could only catch snippets of the conversation, words like interview, flexible hours, remote work. When Anna came back into the room, there was a look of nervous excitement on her face that Elena hadn't seen since before Stas. "That was a marketing firm," Anna announced. "A former colleague recommended me. They have a part-time remote position open. It's not glamorous and the pay isn't great, but it's a job. I have an interview tomorrow." "That's wonderful news, Anya," Elena said, her heart swelling with a fierce pride. This was it. This was the first brick Anna was laying in the foundation of her new life. A life she was building herself. The next day, while Dmitri came over to watch the baby, Anna put on a simple professional dress, one of the few non-designer items she had left, and went to her interview. When she returned a few hours later, she was crying, but this time they were tears of relief and joy. "I got it," she said, wiping her eyes. "They offered me the job. I start next month." That evening, the three of them, Elena, Dmitri, and Anna, sat around the kitchen table after the baby was asleep. It was the first time in a long time they had sat together without a crisis to solve or a tense silence to endure. "I need to say something," Anna began, her voice clear and steady. She looked at her mother, then at her brother. Thank you. For everything. You didn't have to help me. You could have thrown me out and you would have been right to. But you didn't. You saved me. She took a deep breath. I know sorry isn't enough for what I did, for what I was willing to do. I don't know if I can ever truly make it up to you. But I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying. I'm going to work hard. I'm going to pay back every single ruble of that debt. And I'm going to be the best mother I can be to Andre. She slid a folded piece of paper across the table to her mother. It was a new budget written in her own hand. It was meticulously detailed, allocating a significant portion of her new, modest salary to her debt repayment plan, with smaller amounts for her share of household expenses and a tiny sliver for personal spending. At the bottom, she had written a new line item, Andre's University Fund, with a small but consistent monthly contribution next to it. Elena unfolded the paper and studied it. It was more than just a budget, it was a testament, a written promise, acknowledgement of a debt, and a concrete plan for its repayment, both financial and moral. She looked up at her daughter, at the determined, sober, and finally adult woman sitting across from her. She saw the strength forged in the fire of humiliation, the wisdom born from catastrophic error. Her daughter had finally balanced her own books. This is a good plan, Anna, Elena said, her voice thick with emotion. She folded the paper and placed it in the pocket of her apron. A very good plan. The future was still an unwritten ledger. There would be difficult days, financial struggles, and the lingering scars of the past. But for the first time in a very long time, Elena felt a sense of profound, unshakable peace. The storm had passed. The foundations had held. And a new, more honest and far more valuable asset had been added to their family's balance sheet. A hard-won, clear-eyed hope. A year passed. It was a year measured not in dramatic approaching 70, found a new purpose in her role as Babushka Lena. She had not just a peaceful retirement events, but in the small incremental victories of a life being painstakingly rebuilt. It was measured in the steady shrinking of Anna, but a vital one. She was the family's anchor, the keeper of traditions, the chief logistics officer who enabled credit card debt, each payment a small act of atonement. It was measured in the growth of her son, Andre, Anna to balance a demanding job with single motherhood. She taught Andre how to count using abacus beads, how to tend who transformed from a helpless, red-faced infant into a curious, crawling toddler with his grandfather's serious eyes and his to the violets on the windowsill, and how to read the stories from the same worn books she had once read to Anna's mother's infectious laugh. And it was measured in the slow, cautious mending of the relationship between a mother and Dmitri. In her grandson's curious eyes, she saw the untarnished legacy of her husband, Andre's daughter. The tense, oppressive atmosphere of the apartment had long since dissipated, replaced by the chaotic, joyful clutter of a home, and in his laughter, she heard the truest return on any investment she had ever made. One crisp Saturday afternoon in with a small child. Toys were scattered on the living room rug where Elena's ledgers once lay. The scent of baked autumn, the doorbell rang. It was Dmitri, but he was not alone. Standing beside him, looking nervous and holding a bouquet of bright autumn flowers, was a woman with kind eyes and a warm, intelligent smile. Mom, apples was now often mingled with the less romantic but equally comforting smell of baby powder. Elena's meticulously ordered life had been Anna, Dmitri said, a rare note of bashfulness in his voice. I'd like you to meet Kay, joyfully disrupted, its quiet equilibrium replaced by a vibrant, unpredictable new rhythm. Anna had thrown herself into her war. Katerina. My partner. The introduction of Katerina, a pediatric doctor Dmitri had met through a mutual friend, and motherhood with a ferocity that stunned Elena. The remote marketing job, initially just a lifeline, became a source of pride, marked a new hopeful chapter for the family. She was calm, grounded, and possessed a quiet strength that mirrored Elena's own and purpose. She was good at it, her natural charm and energy now channeled into productive, honest work. She received. She was not intimidated by their complex family dynamic. She seemed to understand it implicitly. As she sat at their kitchen table, a small promotion and the extra income went directly towards accelerating her debt payments. She was a different woman from the one chatting easily with Anna about the challenges of working motherhood and discussing a new historical novel with Elena. It felt as though who had dreamed of a life of leisure at Elysium Towers. The desire for unearned luxury had been scoured away, missing piece of their family puzzle had just clicked into place. Watching Dmitri and Katerina together, a gentle, easy affection flowing by the harsh realities of her downfall replaced by a deep appreciation for the quiet dignity of self-sufficiency. Between them, Elena felt a profound sense of peace. Her son, who had carried so much of their family's burden for so bond between her and Elena, was no longer one of strained politeness or pragmatic alliance. It had deepened into a quiet, was finally building a future for himself. He was happy. Later, while Anna was putting an excited Andrei profound partnership. They were a team, navigating the daily challenges of raising a child and managing a household. They developed into bed. Elena and Katerina were clearing the dinner dishes. You have a wonderful family, Elena Ivanovna. Katerina, easy rhythm, communicating with glances and half-finished sentences. There were still moments of friction, echoes of their old dynamic said, her voice sincere. The bond between the three of you is incredibly strong. It wasn't always so, but they were fleeting. The foundation of their new relationship was a hard one, mutual respect. Anna respected her mother's, Elena admitted, handing her a dish to dry. We have been through difficult times. We had to balance wisdom and strength, and Elena respected the incredible resilience and determination her daughter had shown in the face of her own self-made some very challenging accounts. Dima told me a little, Katerina said gently. He told me how disaster. One Saturday afternoon, as Elena was on the floor playing with Andrei, building a wobbly tower of brightly you stood up for yourself. He's very proud of you. The words, simple and direct, landed in colored blocks. The intercom buzzed. It was Dmitri. Let him in, sweetie, Elena said to Elena's heart with a quiet, satisfying weight. She had never thought of it in terms of pride. She had only done Anna, who was preparing Andrei's lunch in the kitchen. Dmitri entered, his arms full of groceries, what was necessary, what was logical. But hearing it framed that way, she allowed herself a small internal flicker of satisfaction. She as usual, but his expression was more serious than his typical weekend cheerfulness. After hugging his mother and ruffling his head held the line. The following week, a letter arrived. It was addressed to Elena, the envelope made of thick nephew's hair. He sat down at the kitchen table where Anna was spooning mashed carrots into a bowl. Creamy paper, the return address, a prestigious law firm in the city center. Her heart gave a small cautionary flutter. Have some news, he said, his voice quiet. About Stas. Anna froze, the spoon hovering midair. A vestige of old anxieties. She opened it with the silver letter opener, her movements precise. The letter was not. It had been over a year and a half since his name was last spoken in this apartment. The black hole of his memory a threat, but an invitation. It was from the estate of Andrei Viktorovich Shevchenko. The consultant, it informed her, had passed away from a sudden heart attack 2 months prior. The letter went on to state that, and it had been so carefully avoided that hearing his name now was a jolt, like touching a live wire. What about him? Anna asked, her voice carefully neutral. He was arrested, Dmitri said, laying the facts out with review of his private papers. His executors had found a sealed envelope addressed to her. As per his instructions, they were forwarding it to her. Tucked inside the formal legal correspondence was a smaller, personal envelope. Her name was written on his usual clinical precision. Not by my unit. The regular police. It was a sordid, pathetic business. The front in a confident, flowing script. Her hands trembling slightly, Elena opened it. The note inside was brief. Was caught trying to use a forged credit card at a high-end electronics store. When they searched his apartment, they found A written on the same heavy paper. Dear Elena Ivanovna, you may be surprised to hear from small-scale counterfeiting operation, fake documents, more forged cards. It seems his life of crime devolved from Grand Khan's me. I find myself, in these later years, balancing my own final ledger, and your name appears as a significant entry to petty fraud. He paused. He's also being investigated for his connections to an illegal gambling ring. The people. Our meeting 5 years ago was a professional low point for me, but a personal turning point. Your refusal he owed money to finally turned on him. It seems he'll be going away for a considerable amount of time. To be intimidated, your absolute clarity and strength in the face of what I now recognize as a deplorable ambush, was a lesson. Elena watched her daughter's face carefully. She saw no flicker of lingering affection, no sadness. Instead, she saw I was too arrogant to appreciate at the time. You were not my target, you were my teacher. You reminded me of flicker of something that looked like relief, followed by a profound, weary pity for the man who had almost destroyed her. A type of integrity I thought no longer existed in this world. Asterisk. I cannot undo the distress I caused your family. Good, Anna said, her voice firm. He got what he deserved. She turned back to feeding her son, but I wanted you to know that after our encounter, I dissolved my partnership with those 2 lawyers and restructured my practice. The action a clear statement that her life, her focus, was here in this kitchen. With her real family. The ghost of Stanislav Orlov had finally been exorcised. Dmitri nodded, satisfied with her reaction. I spent my final years offering pro bono financial counsel to seniors at a community center, helping them protect their assets from predators. There's something else, he said, turning to his mother. I was reviewing some of Stas's confiscated of all kinds, both corporate and familial. It was in its own way an attempt to balance my own books, files. It seems after his dinner with you, he became obsessed. He hired a private investigator to dig into your life. I do not ask for your forgiveness. I only offer my belated and sincere respect. Sincerely, Mom. He was trying to find anything he could use to declare you mentally incompetent. He was trying to build a V. Shevchenko. Elena read the letter 3 times. She felt a complex wave of emotions, a case to challenge your control of your assets in court. Elena felt a chill run down her spine, a faint surprise, a touch of vindication, and a strange, unexpected sense of closure. She had not just saved herself that night, her actions had rippled outwards, setting in motion a chain of events she could never have predicted. Her simple echo of the fear she had felt that night at the clouds. To know that his malice had continued, that he had been actively trying to destroy her reputation even after he was gone from their lives, was unsettling. Did he find anything? Stubborn refusal to be a victim had, in some small way, redeemed a man she had considered irredeemable? She asked. Dmitri laughed, a short, sharp bark of amusement. You found that it was a final, startling entry in the ledger of that fateful night. She tucked the letter away in the man-perfect credit score, that all your neighbors think you're a lovely, sharp-witted woman, and that you'll a folder where she still kept the documents from that time. The folder was no longer a collection of painful evidence, but a historical volunteer once a month at the local library helping seniors with their taxes. The investigator's final report basically said, this record of a battle fought and won. A few days later, Anna came home from work, her face glowing with woman is more mentally competent than I am. Stas wasted his money. The 3 of them sat in silence for a moment, excitement Elena hadn't seen in years. Mama, you won't believe it, she said, absorbing the final, pathetic chapter of the Stas saga. It was a story not of a criminal mastermind, but of a document from her bag. My final credit card statement. Look. She handed the paper to Elena. At a desperate, foolish man whose grand ambitions had crumbled into petty crime and pathetic revenge fantasies. It's finally the bottom of the long column of payments in bold, satisfying print, were the words, balance, 0.00 over, Anna said quietly, more to herself than to them. It's all really truly over. Later that evening REB. Anna had done it. After 5 years of relentless, disciplined work, she had paid off every last K. After Dmitri had left and Andrei was sound asleep in his crib, Elena and Anna sat together in the living room, Sapingapek of the debt. She was free. I'm free, Anna whispered, as if saying the words aloud made tea. The news about Stas had brought a sense of closure, but it had also stirred up the silt of the past. Them real. She threw her arms around her mother, hugging her tightly. Thank you, Mama. Thank you for not. Mama, Anna began, her voice hesitant. Do you think you can ever truly forgive me giving up on me? I never gave up on you, Anya, Elena said, her voice thick with emotion. Elena looked at her daughter. She saw the capable young woman, the loving mother, the diligent employee. She saw I just gave up on the fantasy. I always believed in the woman you could be. That evening, to shame and regret that still flickered in her eyes from time to time. Forgiveness was a complex word. It was celebrate they didn't go out to a fancy restaurant. Instead, they cooked a special dinner at home. Dmitri not, she had learned, like flipping a switch. It was more like a landscape slowly recovering after a wildfire. The Ekaterina came over. They opened a bottle of good wine Dmitri had brought. They ate and they laughed. The ground was still scarred, but new life was stubbornly, determinedly pushing its way through the ashes. Anna, she said, easy, uncomplicated laughter of a family at peace. Andrei, now a chatterbox of a 5-year-old, Reg choosing her words with care. I have already forgiven the daughter who sits before me now. The woman you have become, led them all with stories from his kindergarten class. As Elena looked around the table at the faces of the people she loved, there is nothing to forgive. She is strong and responsible and a wonderful mother. the person I struggled with was her strong, honorable son and his wonderful partner, her resilient, redeemed daughter, her bright, beautiful grandson. She felt a sense the girl who was willing to sacrifice her family for a fantasy. And that girl. I don't think she exists anymore, of wealth so profound it was almost overwhelming. It was not a wealth that could be measured in rubles or stock portfolios. She reached out and patted Anna's hand. You have paid your debts, my love. Not just the financial ones. It was a wealth of love, of resilience, of shared history, of hard-won wisdom. Later, after have earned your own forgiveness. That is the only kind that truly matters. Anna's eyes filled with tears, but everyone had left and the apartment was quiet again. Elena sat in her armchair, Andrei's hand knitted yellow this time. They were quiet tears of gratitude, of release. The final weight had been lifted from her shoulders. A blanket draped over her lap. She picked up the small porcelain ballerina from the mantelpiece, its delicate form a symbol of grace. Few months later, on a bright spring morning, Elena was in her bedroom, sorting through some old boxes. She came across the dress she had worn to the clouds, her dark blue silk armor. She took it out and held it up. And balance. She thought about her life as a series of ledgers. There had been columns for joy and for it no longer felt like a symbol of a battle fought and won. It felt like a relic from another lifetime, from sorrow, for profits and for devastating losses. The Stas affair had been a catastrophic write-off, an investment in a war that had long since ended. On an impulse, she took it down to a local consignment shop that supported her daughter's happiness that had gone spectacularly bad. But from that loss, new assets had been created. Anna's strength. Women's charity. Let another woman wear it, she thought. Let it be her armor for her own battles. She Dimitri's happiness. Andrei's future. Her own vital, love-filled old age. The final balance didn't need it anymore. Her life now was not the one she had planned. It was not a quiet, solitary retirement, not just positive, it was abundant. She looked around her small, cozy apartment. It was not Elysium Towers. It was noisy and messy and often exhausting. But it was full. It was full of the sound of her. There was no panoramic view, no concierge service. But it was a fortress of love, a sanctuary of integrity, a home-built grandson's laughter, the quiet companionship of her daughter, the steady, loving presence of her son. Her assets were not on a foundation of sand and lies, but on the bedrock of character. And that, she knew with the certainty of a master, no longer just numbers in a bank account. They were the immeasurable, priceless treasures of a family that had weathered. An accountant who has reconciled her final, most important account. Was the only true wealth in the world. The books were balanced. And catastrophic storm and emerged, scarred but whole on the other side. That afternoon, the phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. They were beautiful,